I'm a Christian brother, and I run the Christian Brothers Center. I'm not a theologian or a scripture scholar, so this is my own thoughts and presentation that I've cobbled together. So you look at the picture, and I say it's our fragile planet, and I ask you to look at those hands, and whose hands are they at this present moment? How are we holding our earth? I asked the question, what is the state of our planet? And if we look at things for the next 20, 30 years, there's climate change, and that's because of our energy crisis on fossil fuels and the failure of all our systems, economic, political, cultural, education, religious systems, to come up and face this crisis. They're all interlinked. And it leads to so much social, political, economic equality, social unrest, and now we've also got COVID-19. And the challenge is, how do we remain people of hope? I'm just going to play a little quick video to show you a little bit on climate change. I hope you can all pick it up.
Some of the official predictions about climate change sound biblical in scale. Drought,
Can you all hear?
flooding, all of the most powerful tropical cyclones, and of course, the seas rising. A familiar litany. One, they say we need to do more to fight. They will need rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. Our current no-action path is like this: rising carbon emissions, and that would take us to a more than 4-degree rise by 2100. But there is policy in place that should restrain carbon on this path. That probably means about a 3-degree rise. And if countries make good on some of their promises, it should be a touch lower than that. Scientists, though, have been hoping for this path, which would mean about a 2-degree rise. Now, though, they say we should aim for under 1.5 degrees.
Now that 0.5 degree change may not sound like much, but scientists think it could radically reduce the harm done to our world by climate change. The thing is though, to get there, we have to reduce our net carbon emissions to 0 by the year 2050. And that means huge changes to the way that we get around, to how we generate electricity, to how we arrange our cities, what we wear, even to what we eat.
You can see why zero emissions are so radical if you look at carbon emissions in historical context. Hitting 0 by 2050 would need a very sudden shift in direction.
It's about making the Chinese leadership, Indian leadership, many of the African leaders decide to move away from coal. And unfortunately, that's quite expensive for these countries. And the real issue is whether and who is prepared to pay substantive costs of a fast switch out of this most pernicious form of fossil fuels.
Now, individual countries make up.
Okay, people, that's just a short excerpt of it. I want to just go, sorry, there's a bit of a problem here. Just do a little bit more on a water crisis.
You've probably heard a lot about rising sea levels and flooding like never before. But the biggest water crisis brought on by climate change could be not having enough to drink. Three of the world's biggest cities, with over 3 million people, already face extremely high water stress. That's a total of 255 million people throughout the world. But by 2030, that number could almost double. 71% of the planet is covered in water, but only 2% of that is fresh, and only half actually accessible, 1%. The rest is trapped in glaciers and ice sheets. After looking at how much water is actually available and how much is used for other resources, we are left with 0.007%, and climate change is going to take a hacksaw to this slim percentage. A warming world is speeding up our hydrological cycle. That's our water cycle. In a warmer world, more water is evaporating into the atmosphere, and warmer air can hold more water vapor. So when a storm comes along today, there's a lot more water vapor up there for that storm to sweep up and dump on us than there was 50 or 100 years ago. That's why our heavy rainfall events are increasing. But heavy rainfall is bad news for groundwater, because in order to recharge our groundwater resources, we need the rainfalls to sink into the ground. When it falls in heavy downpours, it runs off into rivers, streams, and eventually the ocean, and we don't retain as much on land. So as climate changes, our natural pattern of variability, wet and dry, is being stretched in both directions. And that's bad news for our water. Climate change is making our droughts stronger, longer, more intense, and in some places like California and Texas, where I live, more frequent as well. During the California drought, some farmers would spend days trucking in water to meet their basic needs for their farms. And where there's water shortages, there can be war. The 5-year Syrian drought produced crop failures that exacerbated the existing political instability and the ensuing civil war that in turn created a global refugee crisis. In Yemen, which has been slowly running out, have been going to war over water, and now the country is almost in complete collapse. Over 1 billion people depend on seasonal melt from snow and ice, but the Himalayan glaciers may lose over 40% of their ice by the end of the century, and the Alps could have 70% less snow. None of this accounts for global population growth, but water use has grown at more than twice the rate of our population increase. That means we don't just need more food, we need a lot more water. Water has to be treated as the scarce resource it is before we run out of it, not after.
So these two little clips explain the situation we're in, the climate change because of our energy use, mostly through fossil fuels, and that's changing climate, and we have these extremes of weather throughout the world, and it's happening all the time. That's a picture of the Australian fires that created own local microclimates that even made lightning carry on with the fires, etc. Now, added to all this, you all know we've got the COVID-19 crisis. And now with decreased economic activity, in many places, our carbon emissions have been reduced drastically. We've seen the satellite images over China and various places, the cleanup that has happened. The water in the canals of Venice is clear. It's just been amazing, but we cannot carry on like this. So how do our economic systems adjust to both these challenges of starting up again and the climate crisis post-COVID? One of the biggest things is population growth. In a recent thing on the BBC, the famous ecologist, no, I just forgotten his name, spoke about densifications, and one being the human population densification, and that allows for virus to spread. Where you've got animal populations, densifications close together, like chicken farms, etc., viruses can spread like anything. But in a healthy ecosystem, viruses just don't spread because everything is in balance. How do we address population growth? One of the biggest challenges, both to our church and to social society and governmental systems, etc. I just throw that out there. This little slide shows that a huge densification in Southeast Asia of China, Indonesia, India, more people living inside that circle than outside it. And Africa's population is increasing astronomically. It's about 1.3 billion now. So these things have to be addressed. There are some challenges. How it's done is a very, very big question. So what are they just addressed now, part of these 4 questions? Where are we? I've just tried to show you where we are. One of the big questions is, how did we get here? What is possible for the future? And where do we go from here? Now, how do we get here? How do we make sense of the world and ourselves? And these big why questions. Where did everything come from? Who made the world? Why are we here? What is my ultimate aim, etc., etc.? Am I just a bunch of atoms obeying the laws of physics and I stay here for a while and that's it? Or is there much deeper meaning? And there are two ways to answer these questions. One is by storytelling and the other is by modern science. Now, science and religion have been in a tug of war since the Middle Ages, just about. And they try to answer different questions about the origin of the earth and our start as humankind. And in the modern world, each needs each other. The sciences, they answer the big what questions. What has happened? They measure things through instruments, etc., and through our senses. And they make rational decisions. They say, this has happened. So they answer the big what questions. But they can't answer the big why questions. And that is our faith. It's a leap in the dark. It's mystery. Why are we here? Who made me? What is my ultimate purpose, etc. Now, a famous scientist said this: science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. And that was Albert Einstein. And toward the end of his life, Albert Einstein said he was sorry that he didn't study the mystics of the Middle Ages much more to get the deeper meaning, because ultimately they come to a big basic question called why, and it's all mystery to them. Even the famous scientist who just passed away, the one who was in the wheelchair, forgive me for forgetting names, he even admitted this must all be mystery. They can't answer, why did suddenly the world come into existence? So all cultures, all races, all nations, tribal nations, etc., have creation myths. And a myth is an imaginative story that uses symbols to speak about reality, but a reality that is beyond our understanding. And many cultures, ancient and modern, have creation myths that provide a ways of thinking about the mystery of the universe and the world and our presence in it. And for us, Christian myth, Christian story that tells about this is the Genesis story. It tells a story of 6 days. That is not a scientific story. It's a meaning story to give us meaning. It's not the actual fact. What I take out of the Genesis story is the saying that God saw that it was good, and God saw that everything was good. So God is working in the creation. It is good how it has all happened. But the big question is, what does our creation myth or our story lead us to do? How do we respond? How does it give us meaning? How do we operate? Is our operating system a hierarchical order where one level is better than the other, and it leads to the abuse of the lower system because the one level is much better than the other? So even in the human, the spirit, the mind, and the body are divided. Where is God in all this? Is God an unknown transcendental idea that that just controls everything, or what? Or is God immersed in everything? Are human beings above the animals and the plants in organic matter? But this type of hierarchical order has led to the very words that I'm trying to explain about transcendence, dualism, patriarchy, separation, aloneness, individual autonomy, power over, status. And you can really look at these words and see what is happening in our world. And in many cases, this is all prevalent. We have to question this. I just throw this out there. Modern conditioning has enslaved us all to various forms of tribalism around religion, around ethnicity, around nationhood. We define our identity over and against everybody else. And if you look at our government systems around the world, etc., sometimes it's going all the way back to not cooperation, but nationalism. My patch, and we've got to protect that. And I'm better than the other patch, etc. So this is a really big change or really big challenge. How do we break this change, this chain as I've pictured there? Forgive me for stuttering a little bit. I'm a little bit nervous. Now I want to show you a movie called The Awakening Universe. This was produced by Father Thomas Berry and a mathematical cosmologist, Brian Swim. Father Thomas was a Passionist priest. He's passed away. He styled himself as a geologian. He studied geology. He studied all forms of religion and social systems, and integrated this with scriptural studies and studies of all other religions. And he met up with this mathematical cosmologist, Brian Swim, who runs the Californian Institute of Integral Studies. And they have produced, this is a fairly old one, it's around 2008. They produced another big DVD called The Journey of the Universe in 2011, but we cannot show that. It was brilliantly produced on a little Greek island. So this is about 15 minutes long, and I hope I can show this to you, if I can bring it up now.
We will be alienated from the universe until we have a story, an adequate story of the universe that tells the story of the human as well as the story of everything else, because it's part of one single process that's been going through a sequence of transformative episodes.
This idea of an emergent universe is very, very new. There's no culture, no tradition, no sage, no prophet that could know that the way our generation is blessed to know it.
When we begin to realize this tremendous sense of time that's orienting us and space that's grounding us, we are energized in a new way to take responsibility for the planet and its ecosystems. In other words, our response to the magnificence of cosmology and this story is a responsibility to its continuity. The universe story shows how profoundly related we are. It shows that we are involved with each other and have been for a long time. So it is not the case that the earth was assembled and then we were added to the earth and it was there for purposes. Rather, we came out of the earth.
For millions of years, every morning on Earth has dawned upon a world of greater biological diversity than the day before. In our endless journey around the sun, our Our sweet and generous earth has brought forth an ever-increasing expression of complexity and sophistication, of beauty and wonder. But now, after eons of more and more, suddenly there is less and less. In a geological instant, the vitality of our Earth has plummeted. Every one of our vital life systems is showing signs of a serious and precipitous decline. So serious that most biologists now agree that we are in the midst of what they call mass extinction event. The last time that happened was 65 billion years ago when an asteroid ended the reign of the dinosaur. Now, the cause is an asteroid. For it is the impact of human activity, specifically technological, industrial, civilized human activity, that is literally destroying our planetary life support system. Are we being alarmists? You bet. Because this news is alarming. And alarms are designed to present danger and to wake us up. It's time to ask some serious questions, like what spell have we fallen under that would allow us to destroy the very system upon which we rely for our own survival? And how do we break that spell? If we are going to find our way to a workable future, it might be wise to first go back to the distant past. All the way back to what science currently uses as the beginning of everything. Imagine nothing. Not space, not darkness, not even a vast emptiness, but nothing. Now, imagine everything. In a stupendous explosion of light, heat, energy radiating out in every direction, the universe erupted into existence 13.7 billion years ago. You can see that everything that ever was, is, or will be was compressed into a space smaller than the sea, tinier than a tear, more minuscule than a molecule. All space, everything that would ever exist started as a single point. So in a very real sense, science has discovered what indigenous people have known all along. We are all one. We are all connected. We all come from the very same source. This massive fireball continued expanding, eventually cooling enough to the very first atoms. If the expansion is a little bit slower, the universe will collapse into an enormous black hole. Or if the expansion had just been a little bit faster, the universe would have expanded just too fast for the galaxies. And so we have simply dust. If you alter the expansion just one little piece, the entire universe would collapse. So what it suggests is that there is this profound wisdom at work. Then, in a cosmological wink of an eye, 100 billion galaxies swirled. We didn't know there were any galaxies in the universe 100 years ago. We thought maybe there was just one. Now we realize there's 100 billion galaxies. But we're just beginning to understand some of the dynamics of the galaxies. And to think that they actually have intrinsically the intelligence or the ordering power to bring forth all of this element. And so the galaxies themselves, they organize all the material and give birth to stars. And when scientists really began to look at galaxies this way, they realized they're really something of living itself. That's news. That's another way of imagining our way into the universe. And now these whirlpools of galactic creativity begin to fulfill their cosmic destiny as they each give birth to 100 billion stars. When these first stars reach the end of lives. They collapsed in on themselves and erupt into immense cosmic explosions called supernovas. Thomas Berry refers to the supernova event as a cosmological moment of grace. He calls it the great sacrificial moment because the death of the star is what enables all future life to evolve. The supernova embodies the archetype of death and birth. It's a mythic moment on a cosmic scale.
Out of these clouds of stars, billions of second-generation stars are born. One of them was the star we call our sun. Left over from the formation of the sun was a wisp of green that swirled itself into a necklace of 9 spinning lines. The jewel of which was the swirling mass of molten lava was to become our home, the Earth. Out here on a tiny planet suspended in perfect equipoise, the force that set the galaxy spinning and ignited the stars produced its next miracle, a universe. It was the birth of life. Now this miraculous manifesting force began to clothe itself in biology, expressing itself in increasingly complex and sophisticated expressions of beauty and elegance.
Earth, as we see it now, 5 billion years after that initial experience, has arrived at such a complexity, such a development, such a journey of that original fire, that she is now alive. In other words, the universe on Earth reached a complexity of which universe is not life.
Think about it. Everything we see around us has developed from the boiling cauldron of the early Earth, a sphere of lava that miraculously gave rise to sea and the atmosphere, and then life, its infinite expressions. As Brian Slim said, the Earth was once molten rock, and now sinks up. So all creativity, all consciousness arises in some mysterious way from the depths of the Earth itself.
Right into the heart of this immense celebration of biological creativity, the universe produced its next surprise, an upright tool's priming, an opposable thumb, and a remarkable ability to reflect on its own existence. In essence, after nearly 14 billion years, the universe had created a way to become aware of itself.
Or the universe itself. We are Earth conscious. This changes everything.
Human beings lived in harmony with nature for eons, until they discovered how to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. While most humans continued on in nomadic ways, some chose to settle in place, and in a mere 10,000 years, they created everything we now consider to be human history.
Why out of stardust has this come? Why birdsong? Why green? Why the lushness of palm and the stability of cypress, the grandeur of the mountains, of wide oceans with the plumes of teeming life? We are part of a journey so much more than we
move into this understanding, we have a new identity of ourselves as cosmological beings. Not just Americans, not just French, not just Democrats, not any small category. We are the universe forming, and it's true of everyone. It's amazing to understand of ourselves that it's so profoundly inclusive. And everyone is part of this. Everything is part of this. And we discover as well a profound kinship that no matter what being we're talking about on the planet, we are related. We're related in terms of energy. We're related in terms of genetics. We're all, one way or another, like a form of kin. And I just it's overwhelming. So it's just now coming into human awareness. It's going to take a lot of reflection to embody this fully, but it is a massive journey.
The universe arose and gave rise to the galaxies. The galaxies gave rise to the stars. Our sun gave rise to the earth, and the earth gave rise to life and to all that we are. And now it is causing us to awaken from our dream of lonely isolation, so we may rejoin great community of life and take on our part in this stupendous unfolding story. As Thomas Berry says, this is our great work.
So people, I don't know how you feel after all that, but I want to take a few things from that. Brian Swim said if the expansion of, and Einstein proved the expansion of the universe, had just been 1/1,000,000 of 1% too fast, nothing would have coagulated. So we wouldn't have had the planets, the stars, etc. If it had been 1/1,000,000 of 1% slower, everything would have collapsed into a big hole, or black hole, what they call gravity. And he said there's a wisdom at work in the world, in the universe. And that would be another way of saying how God is working in the universe. So we are the earth become conscious. We are cosmological human beings. And we are profoundly connected and related to everything, non-biological and biological life on the earth. We can't be separate from that and work as if we are separate from it. So, this is another picture, not of separation, but a kind of a schematic representation of the web of life as we know it. And we are part of this. So what does that lead to in terms of words, interconnectedness, relational, community, diversity, creative spirit, interiority, possibility, interrelatedness? Totally different to the other hierarchical words that I've brought up. So I just wanted to bring this up. This is St. Thomas Aquinas. The universe is the first book of God's revelation. Before any sacred text was written, God was self-revealing through the unfolding universe. Creation is an ongoing process. God's revelation through creation is a dynamic, ongoing process. Revelation never ends. It's not just the Genesis story and what's in the Bible, it's continuing. God is revealing God's self continually every day in what is happening. Now, what can we take from the universe story? And I want you to concentrate or just look at these three things that I bring up. First of all, this incredible total differentiation. To be in the universe is to be different and to be unique. Everything that is made, biological, non-biological, that is coming out of the creative spirit, has an interiority. In other words, it is not property, it has subjectivity, it has personhood. Every tree, every leaf has personhood, has subjectivity. It is not property. But our laws in our world say the human being is the only personhood. Companies can have a legal entity that can be sued, but everything else can be used because it's regarded as property. And in some cases, human beings are regarded as property, women and children in some situations. And the third thing is, everything is in communion and in relationship. I like to think of this as God's operating system in the universe. This is how God reveals God's self every day in our universe. And this is another important thing, how God reveals God's self and takes creation forward as a self-generating property or self-creating spirit. Transformation only takes place through great love and suffering. The primal stars had to collapse before the secondary stars. They had to die and resurrection took place. So what's happening in God's operating system is continual death, suffering, and resurrection. Any mother will tell you with her children to bring about any change takes a lot of love and a lot of suffering. Every teacher will tell you that, to bring about transformation. And I want to come back to that word transformation when we speak about Eucharist. So this is how God operates, this way and through that. And this is God's revelation in an ongoing way all the time. People often, you can hear people say, well, how does God allow all the suffering, etc.? God is working through suffering to bring about transformation, to continue to bring about God's presence on earth. Another way of referring to this is look at Richard Rohr, one of the Franciscan priests. He often gives some beautiful talks about the cosmic Christ, God establishing God's reign since the beginning of time, since the time the universe came into existence. The cosmic Christ was operating. And we are part of that. We have all got to be part of the cosmic Christ, making God's reign present on earth. So what is our worldview? And I'm going to put up two columns here. Sorry. The left-hand one, the earth was created for us. There's a radical discontinuity between subjects, not a collection of objects. The earth is primary, the human is secondary. Nothing is of itself evident without everything else. Life and non-life intertwine. Neither is primary or secondary. Everything is genetically related. We emerged from the earth as an apple emerges from an apple tree. Now, I've shown you why we are here. We've got these two kind of extreme poles of hierarchical and interconnectedness. And I think the way we live, we often move from one to the other. We judge people sometimes, say they're not beneath us. And then sometimes we say we're connected. We can abuse the earth, abuse animal kingdom, abuse our crops, abuse ecosystems, etc. We're not part of that. And I think we move from one model to the other so easily. What operating system are our politicians operating out of? Our national leaders? I think mostly to the left rather than to the right. So how do we respond? Do we just say, so what, that's it? Or do I just pick and choose what suits me? Or do I try and embrace all this in our understanding, the science, etc., and try and deepen our response to what lies at the heart of it. And that is the challenge. In 2015, there was a big lot of action. Leonardo DiCaprio brought out a film called After the Flood, and Pope Francis brought out Laudato Si. And there's also the sustainability goals were brought out. We had got past the Millennium Development Goals, the 17 sustainability. Pope Francis speaks to all that in Laudato Si. He upholds everything the sciences are telling us, not denigrating what he upholds everything. So this was incredible what he said. We've had enough of the immorality and the mockery of ethics, goodness, and faith and honesty. It's time to acknowledge that light-hearted superstition has done us no good. When the foundations of social life are corroded, what ensues are battle over conflicting influence, new forms of violence and brutality, and obstacles to the growth of a genuine culture of care of the environment. We can see God reflected in everything. Our hearts are moved to praise the Lord of creatures and to work in union with them. The universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's faith. And Teilhard de Chardin, the famous Jesuit theologian, said this. He called this panentheism. God is in everything, and everything is in God. Isn't that a wonderful operating system? Another big one, I'm just not going to read through it, because it's just trying to say exactly what Pope Francis is challenging us about climate change, about all the illnesses that happen, and we've got to become conscious of and live in a different way. What he said was we've got to have an integral ecology at the heart of how we work and how we respond. Science, ethics, spirituality, and action. And he put it this way: see scientifically what the scientists are telling us, evaluate ethically, and bring a spirituality into it, and then act effectively. Sometimes we just see scientifically and we go and act. We don't even look at ethics or even bring a spirituality into it. And I think as good religious people, religious thinking people, we've got to have our spirituality at the heart of all this. I just want to do something very quickly about systems of thinking. At the top is linear thinking. We do one thing and we go to the next. For example, we blow up the earth to mine. B, we take it to the factory or the refinery. C, we make objects. And D, we sell them. And on the way, nothing, what happens on the way is even looked at. Because we mine, we might affect indigenous people, we might affect ecosystems. When we manufacture, we don't think of what we're throwing into the atmosphere or the pollution in water or the waste. We consume what do the shop writers, the factory workers get, etc. And then we buy and we create an awful amount of waste, etc. That's total linear thinking. We don't think about what's happening on the way. People are affected, ecosystems are affected, etc., etc. Everything we do has a consequence, and this is what we call systems thinking. Now, on the left is what we call a self-regulation type of loop. If one increases, A increases, the other one will decrease. It'll happen just automatically. For example, at the top, we have more women's rights, then there'll be less women's abuse. That's called self-regulation. Our laws try and do that. Healthy ecosystems do this totally automatically. Nothing is allowed to get too big or allowed to be out of control. But when we come to monocultures and monofood cultures, this type of self-regulating system doesn't work. And so we bring in poisons to keep out all the pests, etc. There's no self-regulation in our food systems, our monocultures of food systems, and there's no regulation in our cities, in our population growth that way. It's not self-regulation. And then the one on the right, as the one increases, the other increases, and that leads to an emerging property. For example, you burn more carbon fuels and you have more greenhouse gas emissions. And what's the emerging property? Climate change. How do we turn that vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle? That we have a positive property emerging. So our whole way of thinking, operating, building, laws, etc., have got to change in the next couple of years or in this century, if we're going to take on all of the challenges that we are facing. It's just a very quick way of explaining it. Emphasis on the relationship between the nodes. So what Pope Francis is challenging us actually is to go from the ego-centered thing to an eco-centered, to go from kingship, one above the other, and then you can see the male species on top, even past stewardship, but to kinship, where everything is interconnected and related. That's the challenge, where we go from here. So I've spoken about where are we, how did we get here because of our operating systems, what is possible for the future. So where do we go from here? No spirituality is valid if it is simple, a personal piosity or devotion. Every genuine spirituality must result in action. Pope Francis is challenging us to do that. One of the people who did a bit of action was Greta. Let's listen to her.
1 year ago, I came to the north and told you that our house is on fire. I said I wanted you to panic. I've been warned that telling people to panic about the climate crisis is a very dangerous thing to do. But don't worry, it's fine. Trust me, I've done this before, and I can assure you it doesn't lead to anything. And for the record, when we children tell you to panic, we're not telling you to go on like before. We're not telling you to rely on technologies that don't even exist today at scale and that science says perhaps never will. We are not telling you to keep talking about reaching net zero emissions or carbon neutrality by cheating and fiddling around with numbers. We're not telling you to offset your emissions by just paying someone else to plant trees in places like Africa, while at the same time forests like the Amazon are being slaughtered at an infinitely higher rate. Planting trees is good, of course, but it's nowhere near enough of what is needed, and it cannot replace real mitigation and rewilding nature. And let's be clear, we don't need a low carbon economy. We don't need to lower emissions. Our emissions have to stop if we are to have a chance to stay below the 1.5 degree target. And until we have the technologies that at scale can put our emissions to minus, then we must forget about net zero. We need real zero. Because distant net zero emission targets will mean absolutely nothing if we just continue to ignore the carbon dioxide budget that applies for today, not distant future dates. If high emissions continue like now, even for a few years, that remaining budget will soon be completely used up. The fact that the USA is leaving the Paris Accord seemed to outrage and worry everyone, and it should. But the fact that we are all about to fail the commitments you signed up for in the Paris Agreement doesn't seem to bother the people in power even the least. Any plan or policy of yours that doesn't include radical emission cuts at the source starting today is completely insufficient for meeting the 1.5 or well below 2-degree commitments of the Paris Agreement. And again, this is not about right or left. We couldn't care less about your party politics. From a sustainability perspective, the right, the left, as well as the center have all failed. No political ideology or economic structure has been able to tackle the climate and environmental emergency and create a cohesive and sustainable world. Because that world, in case you haven't noticed, is currently on fire. You say children shouldn't worry. You say, just leave this to us. We will fix this. We promise we won't let you down. Don't be so pessimistic. And then, nothing. Silence. Or something worse than silence. Empty words and promises which give the impression that sufficient action is being taken. All the solutions are obviously not available within today's societies, nor do we have the time to wait for new technological solutions to become available to start drastically reducing our emissions. So of course, the transition isn't going to be easy. It will be hard, and unless we start facing this now, together with all cards on the table, we won't be able to solve this in time. In the days running up to the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum, I joined a group of climate activists demanding that you, the world's most powerful and influential business and political leaders, begin to take the action needed. We demand at this year's World Economic Forum participants from all companies, banks, institutions, and governments immediately halt all investments in fossil fuel exploration and extraction, immediately end all fossil fuel subsidies, and immediately and completely divest from fossil fuels. We don't want these things done by 2050, 2030, or even 2021. We want this done now. It may seem like we are asking for a lot, and you will, of course, say that we are naive. But this is just the very minimum amount of effort that is needed to start the rapid sustainable transition. So either you do this, or you're going to have to explain to your children why you are giving up on the 1.5-degree target. Giving up without even trying. Well, I'm here to tell you that, unlike you, my generation will not give up without a fight. The facts are clear, but they are still too uncomfortable for you to address. You just leave it because you think it's too depressing and people will give up. But people will not give up. You are the ones who are giving up. Last week, I met with Polish coal miners who lost their jobs because their mine was closed. And even they had not given up. On the contrary, they seem to understand the fact that we need to change more than you do. I wonder, what will you tell your children was the reason to fail and leave them facing a climate chaos that you knowingly brought upon them? That it seemed so bad for the economy that we decided to resign the idea of securing future living conditions without even trying? Our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour. And we are telling you to act as if you loved your children above all else.
Strong words from Greta. So, how does an evolving and understanding of the emerging universe impact on how we go forward? How do we take the things of differentiation, interiority, community, make them a reality in our lives, and love and suffering? This is a lady called Julia Butterfly Hill, who spent 2 years up a redwood tree protesting about deforestation. There will be no peace on earth until there is peace with the earth. It is when we look at all life and we feel that sacred connection that we begin to change how we live in the world. As a result, it will begin to change how others live in the world. And many people on the ground are doing great, great, great things in terms of climate change, young people, older people, so many people, and spiritualities are developing that undertake all this. That is the hope for our world. This is a quote by Br.Terry. I already want you to look at it. We cannot live harmlessly. To live, we must daily break the body and shed the blood of creation. When we do this knowingly, skillfully, reverently, it is a sacrament, small s. When we do it ignorantly, greedily, clumsily, destructively, it is desecration. And in such desecration, we condemn ourselves to spiritual and moral loneliness and others to want. And there's all the social justice issues then. I haven't got time to go through. This is Teilhard de Chardin's Mass on the World when he was in China. It is a beautiful excerpt. So, to serve and to preserve the earth. I put up this thing. How do we live Eucharistically? Is our attitude to the Eucharist just a devotion, or is it meant to be totally part of our life every day? How do we bring about transformation and make Christ, the reign of God, present in our world today? Quality of life is not quantity of stuff. Rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle. You've heard all those. Sustainability, preservation of biodiversity. Excuse me. Social justice, advocacy, leadership, green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, local living economies, how we engage with our world. And doing all that, to me, is living Eucharistically. Thomas Berry, the human has become the desolation of the earth. All human institutions, commercial, governmental, university, religious, etc., and their professions and programs must be judged primarily by the extent to which they ignore or inhibit or foster a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. Everything has got to be judged by that. So my challenge is, what do we bring to the table of life each day, break open and share? Eucharist. Does it ignore or inhibit or foster a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship? Does it foster the reign of God in and with and through the body of Christ? I want to play you a quick little excerpt.
Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream is a symposium body of materials that was developed by the Pachamama Alliance. The purpose of the symposium is to invite you to experience, to respond from your heart in a way that contributes to a shift in our thinking and our action as a human presence on this planet.
When you say you're going to throw something away, where's away? There's no such thing.
Humanity's living off its ecological credit card.
The way we're living in modern society is dangerously diminishing the Earth's ability to sustain human life. What about its effect on other species with whom we share this planet?
We are in the midst of a mass extinction. Half of all species of life may be extinct in 50 years. And what this means is that we don't have 50 years to solve this problem. We don't have 20 years. We have a decade. Companions of ours on this earth are about to disappear forever.
The scientists around the world have come together to tell us that climate change is actually happening at a much faster rate than they had first anticipated. The signs of this are the cataclysmic storms, the extremes in weather, the glaciers melting everywhere, the polar ice caps are melting, and it means that the entire ecosystem is in peril.
It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew?
Everything that is called waste or disposable is the ways in which we are saying that it is acceptable to throw our planet and its people away.
We have a society that believes that we have throwaway resources, throwaway species, and throwaway people. The same mindset that says, I can ball up this can and throw it away. Same mindset says, I can ball up this child and throw that child into a prison forever.
When we go, will the world be better off with us? Or will we make?
I want to show you now something reflecting on COVID. We fell asleep in one world and woke up in another. Suddenly, Disney is out of magic. Paris is no longer romantic. New York doesn't stand up anymore. The Chinese wall is no longer a fortress, and Mecca is empty. Hugs and kisses suddenly become weapons. Not visiting parents and friends becomes an act of love. Suddenly you realize that power, beauty, and money are worthless when you can't get the oxygen you are fighting for. The world continues its life and it is beautiful. It only puts the humans in cages. I think it's sending us a message. You are not necessary. The earth, air, water, and sky without you are fine. When you come back, remember that you are my guests, not my masters. I want to play you a letter from COVID-19 to you. Sorry, this is an idea of thankfulness from Brother David Stendhal Rice. The other one will come up just next one.
You think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response to the great gift that this unique day is, if you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Begin by opening your eyes and be surprised that you have eyes you can open. That incredible array of colors that is constantly offered to us for pure enjoyment. Look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. We so rarely note how different it is from moment to moment with clouds coming and going. We just think of the weather. And even of the weather, we don't think of all the many nuances of weather. We just think of good weather and bad weather. This day, right now, is unique weather. Maybe a kind that will never exactly in that form come again. The formation of clouds in the sky will never be the same that it is right now. Open your eyes, look at that. Look at the faces of people whom you meet. Each one has an incredible story behind their face. A story that you could never fully fathom. Not only their own story, but the story of their ancestors. We all go back so far. And in this present moment, on this day, all the people you meet, all that life from generations and from so many places all over the world flows together and meets you here like a life-giving water if you only open your heart and drink. Open your heart to the incredible gifts that civilization gives to us. You flip a switch and there's electric light. You turn a faucet and there's warm water and cold water and drinkable water. It's a gift that millions and millions in the world will never experience. So these are just a few of an enormous number of gifts to which we can open your heart. So I wish you that you will open your heart to all these blessings and let them flow through you, that everyone whom you will meet on this day will be blessed by you. Just by your eyes, by your smile, by your touch, just by your presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around you. Then it will really be a good day.
Beautiful. Now I want to play you a message from the COVID-19, speaking to you.
Dear humankind, thank you for being a superhost. I never imagined I'd have the opportunity to jump to a species as abundant as you. Most viruses only get to know their original host animal. Many exist entirely in the humid understory of a remote rainforest. We viruses are kept in check by healthy environments with diverse and abundant wildlife. But when you rip forests apart and capture billions of animals to feed your insatiable appetite for flesh and false cures, you bring viruses like me out of our natural quarantines. You introduce us to new hosts, like you. A superhost of 8 billion individuals and counting, a walking, flying, swimming human meat market. You make up a third of all mammals on Earth by weight. The animals you grow to feed yourselves outweigh all the wild mammals and birds on the planet. As you drive our natural wildlife hosts to extinction, you throw us life rafts bigger than the Titanic. Why wouldn't I jump? As sinister as I may seem, it is not in my interest to wipe out my hosts. We all need other life to thrive. So if this sickness in your bodies opens your eyes to the deeper sickness in our shared planet, it will be to all our benefit. But my big question to you is this: am I enough? If apocalyptic fires aren't enough, if vanishing glaciers aren't enough, if super hurricanes aren't enough, is the cold shadow I cast across the lives of you and your loved ones enough for you to finally confront the prospect of your own extinction? Only you, humankind, can choose to be the cure to the deeper sickness. Only you can choose to nurture the ancient oceans, forests, and grasslands that nurture you, to bring back the chorus of birds and monkeys to silent rainforests, and to make wise choices every day in what you consume and how you live. By protecting nature in all its wild and wonderful forms, you protect yourselves. As the earth stops to take a collective deep breath, you have a rare opportunity to reimagine and redefine a new future. So tell me, what future do you choose?
Thank you, people. I'll leave you with this side.